For our project for this chapter, we're going to do a pretend fire inspection of an elementary school and daycare facility. So you're going to go with me as if we were on an inspection. And so it's really important, if you haven't already done so, you need to download the form that's on Canvas, 410E Station, and it's an LA County form that you would use if you were inspecting an elementary school. So if you haven't done that yet, pause this, go download it, print it, and have it with you so that you can use it as we go through this project. Let's get going. Let's get this done. So we were training the fire station personnel on how to do elementary school and daycare type facilities and how to do inspections there. We were pointing out to them that the elementary schools, both public and private, that are one story and have direct exiting are the ones that they are supposed to inspect. So the more intricate or complicated elementary schools, junior highs, and high schools, the fire prevention personnel would inspect. But as of 2001 or 2, they changed the policy. It used to be that all LA County elementary schools, private and public, were done by the school's personnel, but then they changed it so that these, public and private, one story with direct exiting, would be inspected by the fire stations. And part of the rationalization behind that, and the reason why we use this as a really good example, is it's elementary schools involve a variety of things. So they oftentimes have daycare or child care centers. They have assembly buildings. They almost always have a multi-purpose cafeteria / assembly building. And then they always have offices too. So it's very similar to doing a lot of other kinds of inspections that station personnel would do and that you might do in your future, whether you're in fire prevention or in the fire station. And the interesting thing, unlike junior highs and high schools, there's not going to be any shops or any labs or anything that's a little bit more complicated that fire station personnel couldn't do it. So the form that we're going to use is the one I told you to download, Form 410 E. They used to call them E1s, E2s, E3s. They don't use that anymore. Now it's just Form 410E. And the fire code doesn't use the E1, E2, E3 anymore. It's just if it is more than 6 people up to 12th grade, it's an E. It's an E. So these are pre-printed forms that you would use to check off violations. Now, the one thing you also need to do is you need to get out another piece of paper because there's not enough room to write down all of the stuff that you're going to need to write down as to how to correct the problems we're going to see. So get a second piece of paper, just lined paper is okay, and I'll tell you what to do about that. The first copy, normally there would be multiple copies. When you write, it automatically copies to the second and third page. So you would normally give the person the bottom copy, and then the first copy is for reinspection, second is for occupancy file, for their file, and then the third one would be or the original would be given to the school, okay? Okay, so this is what the form looks like. And again, if you haven't downloaded it already, pause, download, also get a piece of lined paper. So hopefully you've already got that done. And what we want to do right now is before we, let's just pretend we know where. So LA County Fire Department and all local fire departments are required to inspect local schools even though they're under the authority of the state fire marshal. They use the state fire marshal's codes and some of the codes in Title 24, Part 9. So Title 24, Part 9 and Title 19 are used in public schools. In private schools, we can use local code, but not in the public schools, only state code. And I explained that a little bit last week, how that works. When you're approaching a school inspection, there are some things that you need to keep in mind. You need to have a common approach. Do it the same way pretty much every time, and it allows for a more effective use of your time, and hopefully you won't miss anything or forget anything. Like I said in the other lecture, consider making an appointment. It reduces time spent waiting for the staff member, and it's just a better, more efficient way to do things. I suggest a routine where of course, you start at the office, like I mentioned in the PowerPoint before this, but once you've done all of that homework and you get there, you want to start outside. The inspection really starts outside. You want to observe the access. You want to observe the address. You want to look for fire department connections, PIVs, OS&Ys, and all of these kind of mechanical hardware that would be outside that's related to fire. Then once you go inside, you want to meet with either an administrator or a plant manager or somebody who's in charge, and you want someone assigned to walk with you who has keys to everything and can help you through the process of inspecting the whole school. Before you leave the office, though, you need to review the fire drill records, and you need to check the fire alarm control panel for any kind of problems. Almost always there is, and I'll tell you about that in a second. So if you choose to, you can legally request a fire drill right then, and usually the secretary or principal will say, but we haven't told everybody there's going to be a fire drill. I say, yeah, then it'll be a really good test of how well they do their fire drills. So I never did that. I kind of felt it was a little mean, but I know a lot of guys that do. Whenever they'd go to an elementary school, they'd say, okay, let's have a fire drill, pull the alarm. And it's kind of interesting to see how people act when it's not part of the plan for the day. And then you inspect the whole campus. So the following slides are going to show you the most common violations specific to schools. And since violations, of electrical cords, fire extinguishers, door stops, and fire doors, these are seen all the time, and we'll talk about that maybe later in the semester. But for right now, we're going to look at violations that are commonly seen in schools. Okay, commonly seen in schools. So first, we want to be looking for address numbers. They should be plainly visible and legible from the street. In fact, this is what the code says, that they must be legible from the street. The code doesn't give a size, it doesn't give a color. It doesn't get that specific because it knows that there's many different situations. Some businesses or schools are right on the street edge, right by the sidewalk. Some are set back, like the picture we're going to see in a second. So the address needs to be legible from the street and have a contrasting color to the background. No tan on brown, that's not enough. You need white on black or red on gray, light gray. It needs to be a distinctly contrasting color, okay, and large enough to read from the street. So I know this is a picture and we're looking from far away, but can you see any address? And there isn't a sign out here that has the address on it. So, a lot of times they say, well, you know where the elementary school is if it's your district. Well, that's true. But what if we're out on a wildland fire and there's a move-up company from downtown LA that's here? They don't know where it is. So they need a clear and... After we look at the address, We're going to look at the fire department access. We want to make sure that it's clear, that areas that are supposed to have signage, fire lane, and red curbs are kept that way. It needs to be 20 feet in width and no less, suitable for getting a fire engine and a fire truck into the facility if needed. And so it needs to be unobstructed and maintained. So as we look at this picture, again, it's kind of hard to see, and hopefully you've got it nice and big on your screen. If you can look to the left, there's a sign, and if I had taken a picture on the other side, that sign says fire lane. Then you look down a little bit more, and there's another one that's really hard to see, and then there's another one over behind the tree. And so this whole thing is a fire lane. Now again, it's very hard to see in this picture unless you got a really big computer and have this full size. You can see the red curb right in front of us and over to the left, but if you look in the distance, it's yellow. Well, why is it yellow? Because they painted over the red. They changed it. See here, this is typical of what the schools will do. They just want to be able to have the moms and dads come and pick up the kids, so they just paint over the red curb. You can't do that. It's a fire lane. So, excuse me, check that off as a violation and explain that the fire lane must have a red curb. It needs to be repainted. When you're done doing that, start it up again and we'll go to the next thing. So we also have a fire lane that goes around the whole school, and oftentimes part of the fire lane is the playground. So we want to, check that out. And here we see a locked gate. In fact, the next slide is a close-up of that locked gate. Now, is this a problem? A lot of people think it might be, but actually, under certain conditions, they can do this. Security is an issue at our local schools, and they are allowed to chain the gate to the fire lane. You see, we've got a master key that's going to fit any one of these locks. It's called bolt cutters. We got bolt cutters so big, some of them are so big it takes 2 guys to handle them. It will cut through this chain, and it might slow us down a little bit, but we can get through there. We're not concerned about chaining the gate to the fire lane. But the only conditions they can do that under, and every elementary school I've been to can do this, they have to be able to have a safe refuge area, which is 50 feet away from the buildings and 3 square feet per child. So if they have a safe refuge area, they can chain the gate. That's not a problem. So we're not going to write them up for that. In fact, if I came up and I saw that they had gone through the effort to put in lines like this, saying no parking, this is part of the fire lane. Look at the big sign on the right, no parking, fire lane. I'm going to tell the principal, hey, great job on protecting your fire lane and keeping it clear. Thank you very much for that. Always want to praise when we can. So this looks good. No violations here, but yes, they've got to repaint those curbs we saw. Then we go inside and we ask for the fire drill records. They're required at an elementary level, which junior hires hate it when you call them elementary, but elementary by definition is through middle school. Now some middle schools stop at 8th, some stop at 9th. Most of the time these days they stop at 8th, but they are required, they are considered elementary, and they have to have a drill once a month. At the high school level, they're only required to do it once a semester, so twice a year. The fire drill records have to be maintained, and an evacuation plan has to be posted in all of the classrooms, and we're going to look for that, make sure that they're there. A list of teachers' duties during emergencies is to be posted, and their job is to maintain order, take the roll book with them, call roll when they get assembled outside, make sure they've got all their students. So this is the form that they would show us that shows when they had their fire drills. So we look through and let's say it's April and we see that January and February it was done and March it was done, or excuse me, April they haven't done it yet, but March wasn't done. And so I look at it and I go, hey, what happened to March? Well, we did it. We just forgot to write it down. Guess what? I'm sorry. If you didn't write it down, well, in the office, there's always going to be the fire alarm. Now, every fire alarm I've inspected at an elementary school, pretty much to every single one, it's common. They're having a problem, and we'll talk about that in just a second. What we do about that if we see that. So all buildings used for educational purposes, even small daycares, are required to have at least some kind of manual fire alarm. So they have to be kept, according to the state fire marshal's records, in good maintained condition. Look at those last couple of lines. Shall be maintained in an operable condition at all times in accordance with these regulations and with their intended use. Well, what do you notice about this alarm? See that little yellow light to the left? What does that say? Trouble, right? We have trouble in River City. Most of you don't even know what I'm talking about, but that's from an old movie. Trouble, right? If there's a trouble that's, and also normally it's going to be making this obnoxious noise, and it's supposed to drive you crazy. I've even seen where the teachers have shoved blankets and pillows over it so they don't have to hear that beeping noise instead of just getting it fixed. So when I show up and I see that the alarm system is not being maintained properly and it has trouble, which means somewhere there's a short in the system or it's broken in some way or another, I put them on Firewatch. So here's the form for Firewatch. First of all, I'm going to check off that their fire alarm is out of service, so I check that box that they're in violation. And then over on the other piece of paper, I'm going to write fire alarm must be maintained in an operable condition. Call fire alarm service company and have the trouble fixed. Until it is fixed, you are under Firewatch. So normally I would get one of these forms out, I'd fill it out, and I'd tell them you're under Firewatch. Now, when we're going around elementary schools, there's one violation we see more than anything else. Item number 3 on there, decorative materials must be made from a non-flammable material or flame retardant treated. They cannot conceal exits. They cannot conceal exit lights or fire alarm sending stations, wet standpipe hose cabinets, and fire extinguishers. When you have a whole bunch of paper in a hallway or on a door, they're blocking the exit. If the door is on fire, that's supposed to be the exit. That's a problem, right? So here's the hallway at Sunshine. And that's a problem. That is so much paper. Now, it's a daycare and an elementary kind of after school care. I'm not going to make them take it all down. I just want less of it. I want a lot less paper, so we're going to space it out. And technically, though, the code says they got to take it all down. They can't have it there. But come on, it's an elementary school, a daycare. They want to put the kids' work up so that the parents can see it when they come to pick them up. But let's get it not so much in the hallway, especially where this is where everybody's going to exit. And if it catches on fire, we got a big problem. The exit door can't be covered with paper. This is a cool thing that some teacher has done from one of their trips with pictures so that the parents can see, but it shouldn't be here on the exit door. Sorry about that, but you got to change it. So check that. Too much decorative materials. Tell them that they can't have it on doors. Tell them that they can't have it in the hallway, or at least not so much in the hallway. Check out this one. Well, at least they put a little slice in the paper so you could still see the extinguisher. Well, maybe that's still a problem because, ta-da, the manual pull fire alarm is under the paper. That's not okay. This is my friend Jason that I was talking about earlier over to the right. I can tell it's Jason because, well, that's his belly, and his tie is tied a mess. I used to help him out and say, Jason, give me your tie. I'm going to retie it for you. And then he'd slip it over his head and tighten it up because he did not know how to tie a tie right. But great guy, really fun, really funny, one of my best friends. But I love to tease him about how he couldn't tie a tie. So make sure you mark this down. That's not okay. Oh, here's a nightmare. And this poor teacher, when you tell her she can't have this paper tree that she spent days and days making, that's against the code. It can't be hanging from the ceiling, and this is way too much paper. It's really a problem. I guarantee you she's going to cry. Now, if she'd done this in fact, this is a true story. I went to this one place and they had just tons of paper in this room, stuff hanging from the ceiling. And I said to the teacher, this is really a problem. You can't have this. And she says, but it's back to school night this week and the parents are going to be coming and oh my gosh. And she started crying. She said, I've spent so much time working on this. And I go, okay, calm down. It's okay. Here's what I'm going to do. You have 2 weeks to take it down. That's what I always give. So you have to take it down by, and then I gave her the date, 2 weeks from now. And she goes, oh, I can't believe you're doing this to me. I'm crying. I go, you're not listening to me, are you? And she goes, oh, I'm just so upset. I said, you have 2 weeks. When's after school night? Back to school night. Oh, it's this week. Yeah, you can have your back to school night, but after back to school night, you need to take it down. So, I try and be fair. Another big problem is some of especially these new modular classrooms, they only have one door in and one door only. So in that case, if they don't have 2 exits, they're required to have an exit or emergency window. If no fire sprinklers and one door, the window farthest from the door has to be an emergency type window. And here's the emergency window, which looks okay from the outside. It's got a gate on it though. And if it's got a gate on it, that can be a problem. Now I know this is hard to see because it's dark in this room, but that is a keyed lock. So this is no longer an emergency exit. You have to have special knowledge. You have to know where the key is. What if the teacher gets knocked out during an earthquake and they can't get out the main door and they're trying to get out here? They're locked in. They can't get out because this has got a key on it. That's not okay. So find that violation, check it, not okay. Well, there's some more problems in these classrooms in this area. They've also put paper over the emergency windows in another one of the classroom and blocked it. But there's even another problem. The emergency window leads to a walkway and exits you into a locked enclosure. So these students, if they could get out, would end up being locked and trapped by the buildings in a fire trap. So if the buildings were on fire, they would just die here because they're padlocked in. That's not okay. A chained and padlocked gate is not okay. So any gate between the building and the safe dispersal area must be easy to open and comply with all the requirements for exit hardware. It cannot have a padlock or require special knowledge. So we want to make sure that there's an emergency exit sign on it and that you can just kick it open. Again, you can't kick this one open or knock it open because there's a padlock on the other side. So shame, shame, shame on them. They've got to fix this. Now, exiting. Exiting is a huge problem in every business, in every assembly, and especially at elementary schools. They can't be obstructed, they can't be used for storage, they can't be disguised. At CalArts, in the basement, they allow graffiti. And maybe I'll use a picture later on for you to see of that. And when I first started inspecting, they also let them graffiti the doors as well. So when you were in the basement, which there's classrooms in the basement, you couldn't tell the difference between a wall and a door if the electricity went out and only the emergency lights were on. It was all just looked like one. The exits have to be of a different color or look differently from the walls around them. Exit doors also have to be openable, I'm not sure that's a word, without a key or special knowledge or effort. In fact, the definition of that is single action. So here's a file cabinet blocking an exit door in a classroom. That's not okay. You can't do that. You got to move the file cabinet. Here's in the cafeteria. Now, you know, the kids aren't going to be this isn't going to be a problem for them, but how about our kitchen staff? We want to keep them safe. They can't get through to the exit. Let me show you the next picture. If there was an earthquake, what would happen to this exit? Here's back even further. Just now, they told me that, oh, well, this is stuff that just got delivered. I said, then put it away. You can't have it in the exit. All of this would be strewn all over the ground if we had had an earthquake, and you wouldn't be able to get out this exit. Here, they've made a corridor into a workspace. This is probably the speech lady or somebody who visits on a regular basis to the school. And you see that thing in the bottom right? That's called a typewriter. You guys probably never seen one of those, but file cabinets, typewriter, desk, and you can't do that. This is not okay. This is an exit way. All of these things have to be moved out of the exit. So do you see a problem with this? Putting a desk right in front of the exit door? Not okay. How about let's put students in the lobby in the exit way? Not okay. Check that on your inspection form. Exit ways blocked, and tell them they cannot block the exits. Here's that same private school. The exit for the multi-purpose room is converted to a classroom, and you can't do that. Now, most of you probably don't know what this thing is, but it is a serious problem, and I see it a lot at daycares and starting to see them sometimes at elementary schools. That's a magnetic lock. And a magnetic lock requires pushing a button or something of that nature to release the magnet. And you cannot, I guarantee you, you cannot open that door by just bumping into it. These magnetic locks are super strong. They use them in prisons. They're really powerful. That requires special knowledge to get out of the building. And a lot of times they put these in for security reasons. You can't use them. You cannot use them. Everyone must be able to get out without special knowledge or special effort. So we're going to enforce this code based on our local code, enforce these violations with our local code and with the state code. Local code if it's a private school, state code if it's a public school. And if you have any questions about how to do this, email me. And this is the end. And make sure that you upload both your inspection form and the notes that you wrote for the violations that we found. And at that bottom part where there's lines, say, see attached document for violations, or whatever, for instructions. That's probably better. See attached document for instructions. And then send both of those or upload them in the assignment, and I'll grade it for you and give you your points. Have a great day. You're done with chapter 4. We're getting close to halfway there.